Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 Tewksbury Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Tewksbury Carnation and the Tewksbury Town Crier. My name is Robert Hayes, and I'm here tonight in my capacity, and only this one capacity, as the editor of the Wilmington Apple. So Tewksbury's annual town election is Saturday, April 6th. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Senior Center, Town Hall, Recreation Center, and the library. This forum is being broadcast live on Tewksbury Telemedia, Comcast Channel 6, and Verizon Channel 33, streamed on Tewksbury TV's YouTube channel, and is being recorded. Thank you to Brian Dorrington and Jason Marshall of Tewksbury Telemedia. Tonight, we have 4 candidates for 2 seats on the select board. I'm going to do this way. We have Jo Marie Buckley, we have incumbent James Mackey, we have Eric Ryder, and we have Thomas Bowley. This forum is an opportunity to hear from candidates on topics of interest, and questions have been secured from community members. If you don't hear a question that is important to you tonight, we encourage you to reach out directly to the candidates, as they will be representing you on the select board. And with that, let's get started. So candidates, I will ask you a series of questions in a round-robin format. You'll have 2 minutes to give your opening statement, and then you'll have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Time permitting, we'll have a few lightning round questions, and then you'll each have 2 minutes for closing remarks. If a candidate mentions another candidate, at the moderator's discretion, that person will be afforded a response. Audience in the room, please silence your cell phones, and please refrain from comments or applause as to not distract our participants. Our timekeeper tonight is Rosalind Impink of the Town Crier, and I will now start with the questions. And I've read all your candidate interviews with the Carnation and your profiles in the Crier, and lots and lots and lots of letters to the editor, and I've reviewed your campaign websites, if you have one, and your campaign Facebook pages, and I listened to a radio interview, and so I'm familiar with your platforms, and I'm hoping to highlight some of the contrasts between the candidates tonight. So the first question is going to Jo Marie Buckley. Please name 3 areas in the town's approximately 100 and I was ready to go. I was ready to go. Opening statement. So you each have 2 minutes to give us your opening statement. And Jo Marie, we're starting with you. And James, you're going to get the first question, okay? So Jo Marie, 2-minute opening statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Carnation, the Town Crier, and Tewksbury Telemedia for covering this tonight. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jo Marie Buckley, and I'm running to serve Tewksbury on the Select Board. I'm running because Tewksbury is at a crossroads of leadership, and I want to bring forth the bright and promising future Tewksbury deserves. I am a wife, a mother of 4, an attorney of 20 years, trustee at the Tewksbury State Hospital, and director and clerk for the Tewksbury Community Pantry. I know the issues we're facing. I know the nuanced relationship we have with the Commonwealth. And I know that we can make the next 10 years a decade of thoughtful development and vital preservation. Tewksbury's open spaces help define our community, from a sports complex unlike any in surrounding towns on Livingston Street to the quietest corners of our intricate trail system. We must not lose our natural selves. I will work to protect Tewksbury. I know how Massachusetts works on the state level. I've overseen budgets on a select board level, and I'm the candidate that can bring the broadest and most dynamic skill set to the table. I want to serve our community to secure the tomorrow we want for our children and grandchildren. I want to work to foster a legacy of stability and assurance. We all curate this town together, and I've listened to my fellow residents. My job as your select woman will be to answer your call to action. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jo Marie. So next up is James Mackey.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank you to all those folks that put the time in to help set this up and make it possible. As Robert said, my name is James Mackey, and I am running for re-election to the Select Board. I'm currently serving in my 2nd year as the Vice Chair on the board, a position that my peers on the board have unanimously chosen me for 2 years in a row. I'm a fourth-generation Tewksbury resident with deep roots in our town and a strong desire to serve and preserve our community. I'm a now, unfortunately, disabled veteran with over 13 years of service in the United States Army. I've deployed to the Middle East in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. I've supported countless domestic operations, working directly and successfully with state and federal agencies. I have almost a decade of time training service members from all branches, except for the Space Force, but we are going to start working with them next year. In my professional life, my career has been dedicated to excellence in building and leading cybersecurity programs, staff, and capabilities for large organizations around the world. In 2022, I left the corporate space and founded my own boutique cybersecurity consulting firm that helps businesses prevent and mitigate cyber attacks. I believe that I have successfully leveraged my unique skill set and point of view for the betterment of Tewksbury. While I am only one vote on the board, and I have personally taken the lead on water, IT, and cybersecurity challenges, and working to drive down the cost of the much-needed DPW and school maintenance facility project. This leadership has had direct and measurable results for our community, and while I don't have the time now to go into details, as I just got the wave, as I'm limited to 2 minutes, I would respectfully ask residents to look at mackeyfortewksbury.com for more information, and hopefully we'll get to more of those questions as we go through tonight. Thank you.
Great, thanks, James. And something I neglected to mention at the beginning, you're going to get a 30-second and then a time's up wave, okay? Sorry about that. So next up is Eric Ryder. The floor is yours, 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. I want to thank the Tewksbury Carnation, Tewksbury Town Crier, Robert, Rosalind. My name's Eric Ryder. I've lived in town for 23 years with my wife Serena and my 3 sons, Blake, Andrew, and Grayson. All 3 of my boys have gone through Tewksbury schools. My oldest son, Blake, graduated last year and now is a freshman at the University of Rhode Island. Andrew is a junior and Grayson is a freshman, both at TMHS. I want to let the voters know that I'll bring more than 30 years of municipal experience to the Select Board, 20 years of that time in a manager's role. My experience in municipal finance, budgeting, and the understanding of enterprise accounts gives me a unique perspective and approach that I'll bring to the Select Board. I also bring more, as my day job, I'm the Director of Public Works for the town of Hudson, Mass., where I manage a staff of 65. I have an operating budget of $16 million, and this year alone, a $46 million capital budget. I oversee water treatment, wastewater treatment, parks, cemeteries, streets, fleet, and transfer stations. My profession requires me to constantly listen to the residents, their needs, and react with their best interest in mind. I've served on the planning board here in town for 4 years where I fought for responsible development. My knowledge and expertise allowed me to have an independent voice. I was not swayed. I used my experience. I will bring the same level of professionalism, thoughtful decision-making to the Select Board if I'm elected. I served as an elementary school building committee member and on the athletic school complex committee. Both projects were on time and on budget. As a member of the planning board, I served on the zoning bylaw committee. I've been a volunteer coach in town for the Tewksbury Youth Baseball, Tewksbury Boys Basketball. Again, thank you very much, and I hope I answered everyone's questions, and I'll bring more later this evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Last but certainly not least, Mr. Thomas Bowley, and the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that's putting this on, Carnation, the town crier, yourself, Rosalind. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll get up. My name is Thomas Bowley. I was born in this town. I've been here my entire life. I am also a 3rd generation in this town. I raised my son here. He's still in town. I'm running for Select Board because I feel that I've seen the town grow from years ago, from many years now, and I've watched the directions it's taken. Some are good, some are bad, and I'd like to help keep it going on the right track. Keep it the community we've all known to grow and love. That being said, we need to keep our seniors in mind because they feel like their voices are not being heard. And many other of the people in town, the younger people, are being driven out, and the seniors, because of the high taxes, and the ever-increasing water and sewer rates. And I would like to work to control some of that and try to mitigate it and keep it so that we can keep this as the community of all of our people.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Is it okay if I call you Tom?
Yes, sir.
I thought so. Okay, great. So thank you for your opening statements. We will now get to question one, and the first question is going to go to James Mackey, and we're looking for 90-second responses. So question one: please name 3 areas in the town's approximately $136 million budget which you would examine for potential cost savings. Please be as specific as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great question. So we do run a fairly lean budget, so areas to cut do get a bit difficult. I think where we need to really dig in is operational budgets. It's very difficult to balance the need versus the level of service that we provide for a lot of things. One of our highest costs is actually solid waste disposal, so our trash issue. A lot of town, or I won't say a lot, there are a number of neighboring communities and communities in our area that don't have recycling or don't have trash disposal to the level that we do. So I think that we really need to consider what and where we cut. There have been some recent items that have come up on budgets that I think could have been reassessed. While I fully support the police department, I don't know if we needed a second dog or a second drone. I mean, everyone loves waffles, I get it, but did we need a second? Do we need a second drone? If there are use cases, then I agree. Other areas to look to cut are going to be some of our maintenance contracts and other contracts we have, and I would recommend plussing up our DPW staff to deal with those in town. And finally, because there's my time card, I would say the third one would be unifying our buying power. So instead of every department having different similar roles and like their own printer contracts, bring that all under one contract and increase our buying power. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, James. So next up is Eric Ryder. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I think we really need to look at Public Works. I'm well tuned in that. I think looking at what we're using outside contractors for versus what we can do in-house. We're paying prevailing wage when we're privatizing the work. So looking to do more work in-house, I think is something that is something for review. I don't necessarily know of, public safety is critical. I don't feel we should be looking at cutting either of those. I think at the end of the day, we have to give them more resources. I would definitely look into, again, overall, looking at, to follow up on Mr. Mackey stated, what we're doing for private contractors. And that's something where you can save in-house along the lines with the school department maintenance staff versus town maintenance staff. Can we consolidate some of those items and use some of those individual trades to offset of contracting things out? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So same question to Thomas Bali, and you'll have a 90-second response.
Thank you. Well, I think also we need to look at all the departments, although I do agree that we need to maintain our public safety. I think that's just strict common sense. But there's most of the departments that there's got to be something in here that can be trimmed or cut. As I said earlier in my opening statement, the water and sewer rates, where's all the money going? Is it all, does it need to be there? Do we need that kind of a rate to spend? Or are we spending the money, is it trickling out and spending someplace that it shouldn't be, that we're duplicating efforts? And that would be my big thing, just to try to keep through all of the budget.
All right, great. Thank you, Tom. Next up is Jo Marie Buckley, a 90-second response.
Thank you, Robert. I think it's a difficult answer because I don't think you can talk about budget cuts without talking about other ways to enhance our budget.
We'll get to that.
I'm sure you will, but I'm going to get ahead of it anyway. I think we can't ignore the fact that 60% of our town budget is the school budget currently, and I think the obvious answer that people might be looking for is we're in the middle of negotiations. The school committee's in the middle of negotiations. And the reality is we need to keep, offering a salary that attracts talented people and keeps talented people. So that's not the obvious choice, but I do think that when we have the DPW facility that is in the process of being built, and we have opportunities to perhaps combine and consolidate some of the school maintenance with the town maintenance, I think that's one area I would definitely be looking at. I think with the Tewksbury State Hospital linking it into the town water and it having hopefully an increase in that revenue is opportunities to have those increases that don't cost the taxpayer anything. So that would be the areas that I would be looking at initially. But I think, the reality is like in your household, you're looking at, how much do we need to live? And that's how our town operates now. They look at, level service budgets is how my understanding of how Mr. Montori approaches things, and I support that. And I think that's the big issue is, the big question is, how do we maintain the service that we currently have without increasing our budget wherever possible?
Great. All right. Thank you, Jo Marie. So our next question is going to go first to Mr. Eric Ryder. So I'm going to go in a different direction here. So name 3 areas in the town's $136 million budget where you feel funding could be increased. And please be as specific as you can.
Okay, thank you. One, I would say 2 are police and fire. Again, we need to provide them with every resource possible to provide the residents the service. Then also, I think the other is I'm an advocate of a full-time recreation director. I know that's been, there's a group out there, and I'm in full support of that. Growing up in a community that had a full-time recreation staff, I worked there throughout my high school career in summers, and also in the town I currently work in has a successful recreation program. So I think those are 3 departments that I would look at increasing. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thomas Bowley, same question, 90 seconds.
Thank you. I agree. I believe police and fire are 2, they're paramount things that we keep right up on top of. They need to have the best equipment. They're the ones that go out when everybody has a problem. They're the ones that go call. As far as increasing, I think as far as increasing, I think we need to do more. We're trying to increase the development in business in town, and if it means increasing a budget for some kind of a community development, then I'm all for that. I think that would probably be my 3.
You're all answering questions that are coming. Okay, thank you, Tom. Next up, Jo Marie Buckley, 90-second response.
Thank you, Robert. Again, you can't answer this without looking at how do you increase the budget, the revenues that we're getting. So it's really difficult because I also support recreation being a component in our budget, but I think that you can't say that we need a full-time staff person without looking at what can we contract out versus what should be in-house. So I think someone mentioned trash in the first one, and I think that's a great example of where towns have, over the years, the evolution of it has been horrific for towns. We were at one point making money on recycling, and now we're paying a premium for recycling. So if anything, I would be looking for opportunities to make that more local so that we're not paying huge contracts for things such as recycling. And if that is an increase in our funding on the short term to save us money in the long term, I would definitely support that. I also think that we have other contracted services that I would like to get a better understanding, such as snow plowing. I mean, this winter, unfortunately, no one really made much money off of that, but the reality is towns are offering a premium for contracted snow plowing because we don't have the ability to have that staff on our on our door, on our budget all the time. So I would want to look at that. What is contracted out? What can we bring in-house? And see, again, if there's a short-term increase for a long-term savings.
Great, thank you. And lastly, James Mackey, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you, Robert. So first and foremost, which is actually going to be the majority, if I had the ability to do it more than once, I would say water. Water is one of our largest issues. It's one of our largest pieces of technical debt, where we have roughly 180 miles of water conduit in town. Half of that is past its end of life. So that's why we have so many issues with water main breaks, water main replacements, and I'm sure we'll get into that later.
We
But
will.
The second would be debt service, because if we're talking about cost savings, and kind of going back to your previous question, using that money to pay down our debt service faster is obviously better for us, so we can get ahead of those payments. And I do want to touch on the recreation piece, because it's something I've personally spent a significant amount of time on. And I'm somewhere in between the other individuals up here, where, yes, we need a rec department. We need rec service offerings. However, we should not be spending money to do that, especially when we can partner with an organization like the Y, who can provide those services and potentially generate additional revenue back to the town. So I think we're on the right track as far as recreation goes. We need to do it, there's no question about that, but doing it intelligently, managing our money, and being financially conservative about doing it is imperative, as with all things. Thank you, Robert.
Great, thanks, James. So James, you did sort of compare and contrast your position to a couple of other candidates, which I like, okay? But we are going to get to a recreation question later on, so I'm not going to do rebuttal now. That was fine. Okay, so our next question is going to go to Tom Bolly first, and you're going to have 90 seconds. So question 3, please name 3 measures the town hasn't already taken to increase economic development, which you feel it should have, and please be as specific as you can. So economic development, 90 seconds.
Okay, first off on the list, I think the permitting process in this town is far too difficult. Far too difficult to cite a business, far too difficult to get permits to rehab or build and to operate. That's the first point. Second point is we don't seem to have any economic development committee in town. It seems to be stagnant. That should be, there used to be, but it hasn't, it's just kind of died off over the years, and that really needs to be reinstituted and make it active to go chase, and try to get people to come to town. Probably the third thing that I would approach, I guess those are the 2 things that I would approach. I really don't know what I would do for a third at this time, but those are the only 2 that come to mind at this particular moment.
Yeah, that's fine. Great.
Yep.
So thank you, Tom. So next up, Jo Marie Buckley, same question, 90 seconds.
Thank you. So we do have an economic development director. I would say if she feels she needs a committee, that would be something that we could support. I believe that in the planning process, we have so many empty storefronts right now with apartments above them because the zoning allows for that. And I think we should be asking the developers what their plan is to help solicit the storefronts to also be filled. Because I think right now that's not happening. They're allowed to build with the housing on top and then empty retail on the bottom, and it's just a bad look. And I think it's a missed opportunity. I also think, one of the things I would find interesting is if the economic development director or the committee that she would create could somehow create some type of grant program to attract small businesses into town, to generate that revenue that's needed, to attract the smaller businesses. We do a great job in Tewksbury with attracting larger companies, and we're very thoughtful in where they are. And I'd like to see, to get that business owner, that person that has an idea for a business that might not have the ability to do it, to give them the ability to come to Tewksbury and start their business here.
Great. Thank you, Jo Marie. So next up is James Mackey, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you, Robert. So I think the single biggest one is to further improve our zoning bylaws. we have a lot of empty storefronts, as we all know. And the problem is with a lot of these new developments, they had maybe 2 parking spaces associated with them, or they were a very small shop that barely has enough square footage to do like a nail salon. We have enough pizza shops, we have enough nail salons, we need more usable space. And that's where I believe the Economic Development Director should continue to reach out to businesses that are looking and figure out what their needs are, and then work with the boards and the town to facilitate those processes. I think that's the single biggest one. I do want to touch on the fact that if you had asked this question 2 years ago, I would have said the permitting process, but we have actually started to digitize a lot of those things over the past 18 to 24 months, and we've already started to hear feedback that that is improving significantly, because it's not get this paper, run over this desk, and then go over here, and then go up 2 floors and get it signed. The digital ability has improved quite a bit. And then as formerly having been on the Economic Development Committee, Ms. Buckley nailed it with, we have an Economic Development Director. We did not previously. There wasn't really a need for the committee. When we asked the committee to kind of define its mission, we kind of spent a lot of time talking about potentially having breakfasts or having a luncheon, but there was no actual mission. So empowering the Economic Development Director is the best thing we can do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, James. And last response for this question will be Eric Ryder, 90 seconds.
Thank you. I think economic development is critical. When I served on the planning board, I fought every one of those zoning overlay districts when we brought in a development and to build condos above that commercial unit. I asked every meeting, do you have a tenant for that? That was one of my sticking points. Again, I think that that's something we need to look at. You know, to touch on, as the rest of the candidates mentioned, Economic Development Committee. You know, as someone stated, the last meeting was April 6, 2022. That's 2 years ago. In my opinion, unacceptable. I understand we have an Economic Development Director, but I think that director needs to work hand in hand with that committee. And we need to be aggressive in going after businesses to bring them to town, because that will offset the residential tax. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Ryder. And though you didn't mention him by name, Mr. Mackey referenced the fact that he used to be on this committee, so I'll give him a 30-second response, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I don't believe it's unacceptable. We had meetings, we discussed, the committee itself could not define its purpose, and the Economic Development Director saw no need for it. So we collectively pushed things off, and we said if we have something comes up where the board is needed, the committee is needed, we will happily reconvene. To date, nothing has come up. If there was a need, we would be doing it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that 30-second response. Now I'm going to get all confused. So I think the next question is going to go to Jo Marie Buckley, unless I'm corrected. And so this question is question number 4. And you know, it's like I know what you're going to say before you say it. Okay, so I know we've touched on some of this already, but I'm going to ask it because not everyone addressed it. Question number 4, please name 3 measures you would support to combat against the overdevelopment of Tewksbury.
Are these
Okay.
all going to be in threes, Robert? This is the 4th question that
There's
you're
a theme.
asking for 3
You'll see.
things.
It'll
I
make
see
sense in the end.
theme. I see the theme. So I think it has been touched upon by all of us sitting up here that the way that we combat overdevelopment is by making sure that we're responsible in our zoning, that we are responsive in what developments are already occurring, and making sure that they're being properly utilized at 100% and not just 60% or 70%. And I do think we do need to look at the zoning that we currently have in place and revisit it so that we don't have situations continue, that we have a lot of housing and a lot of empty storefronts. I don't know if that's 3, but that's where I would start. And I think that at the end of the day, you know, development's inevitable with progress, and we have to be thoughtful in it. We want to keep the small town feel, and we don't want to turn into, I grew up in Burlington. You know, I was born in Lawrence. I grew up in Burlington, and I think Burlington's a great example of how big development can become quickly. You know, the mall was 1 story when I when I was young. And now to get there, you're driving by all things that were just land when I was a child. And I don't want that to become Tewksbury. I love that we have so much open space, and I would want to preserve that. And I think currently we have the ability to do that, and I would support continuing to have that ability.
All right, thank you, Jo Marie. So next up is James Mackey, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you, Robert. So I think the first piece is we just finished a significant overhaul on our zoning bylaws. That was primarily cleaning up decades of small changes that had left lots of conflicts and gray areas. So now that we have a clean slate, we should be looking at how to further improve our zoning. I think the second piece is going back to the kind of zone-by-zone planning or district-by-district planning. So looking at the town center district, what is the mission, updating that master plan. Looking at South Tewksbury, updating that master plan. Where we've had small master plans for different sections or districts, I think we should have them town-wide so we can have a more informed position when we go back to make those zoning changes. I think those two are preeminent in what needs to be done. Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you, James. So next up is Eric Ryder, 90 seconds, same question.
Could you read that again? So
I know.
Make sure I capitalize on it. Thank you.
You got it. So could you please name 3 measures you would support to combat against the overdevelopment of Tewksbury?
Well, I think probably the most important right now is the MBTA community. And, from what I'm hearing on the street, at the baseball games, at the basketball games, at the football games, we don't want any more condos. No more condos, no more apartments. And 1,200 new units will significantly change the landscape of Tewksbury. And I think that right now is the most critical point for this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So next up is Tom Bali. Tom, you have 90 seconds, same question.
Okay. Well, I also agree that I think this MBTA zoning is a real issue, will become an issue. And similar to Mr. Ryder, I have heard, I haven't heard anything good coming from people about it, that they want it. I don't think it's thoughtful planning as far as where they want to put it, or what they want to zone, which we need to be a little more conservative. I think we need building, and we need building, we need housing, we need businesses, but we need to be a little more careful where we put it, and maybe rethink some of the zoning areas where we do put stuff.
Great. So thank you, Tom. So our next question, our 5th question, is going to go to James Mackey, 90-second response. Not going to use 3, okay? So residents want better roadways. They want more sidewalks. They want less water main breaks. How can the town make these necessary infrastructure improvements with limited funds and little appetite for increased fees and taxes?
Great question, Robert. That is quite a challenge because we do have a lot of work that needs to happen. As I previously mentioned, we have roughly 80 miles of water conduit that needs to be replaced. One of the first things that I did working with the town staff, DPW director, town manager, was we got a complete audit of our infrastructure to solve all of that and then align that with those existing projects for roads and sidewalks. Because what we don't want is we don't want to have, we have to replace a water main, but we tear up a road that we paved 2 years ago, and now we're back into potholes and issues. We don't want to be doing road work if we're going to get sidewalks in 2 years. So by deconflicting all of that and looking at longer-term plans, that's been very helpful in kind of that cost avoidance aspect. I don't know, I haven't heard the answer yet on how we can do that without spending money, because everything takes time and money. But I do want to point back to leveraging the enterprise funds, leveraging the state and federal funding where possible, and looking for new revenue sources. As Ms. Buckley had mentioned, working with the state hospital for including them on our water was actually came out of that water audit that I did with the DPW director and town manager that identified the significant capacity that we have that is underutilized to create and distribute water. So I think as we get more knowledgeable and close some of these gaps, we can be more educated and make more informed decisions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, James. So next up is Eric Ryder, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you. Well, this is right in my wheelhouse. On a daily basis, I deal with this. I think we need to look at other methods other than just replacing water mains. We look at lining. We look at other options. There are a lot of new options out there on the market, and I think we look at that from a holistic approach and, from the 10,000-foot view and how we approach that. You talk about sidewalks. Sidewalks, I think DPW staff should be doing sidewalks. I have my staff every year install sidewalks, whether it be 1,000 feet or 25,000 feet. We make sure we buy the proper equipment and we train our staff and we get that done. But I think if we went to the residents and had to increase taxes and said, we are going to spend money on installing sidewalks, if this revenue, this tax increase was going to that, I think overwhelmingly you would have the residents in this town support that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So next up is Tom Bali, 90 seconds, same question.
Well, I think for starters, the long-range planning that's already been mentioned, I think that's a good idea. We need to look at some of our, we need to really be a little more cognizant of where we spend the money when we do the roadways, and rather than just maybe fix a water main, what about making sure that the other utilities that we have underground are fixed, so that when we do the road, we do the sidewalks, we do it once and it's over with. And a lot of the complaints too, when they do tie-ins, sewer tie-ins, and when the town goes down, when they're doing a road over, the town contractors leave the roads a mess. And I can understand why people complain. I complain about it.
Great. All right, thank you, Tom. So next up, Jo Marie Buckley, 90 seconds, same question.
Great. I appreciate that it wasn't a 3. I would say, I think we need to make a distinction that Main Street, Route 38 is a state road, right? So I think our responsibility in that is to make sure the state is properly maintaining it and doing it 1 mile at a time as they've rolled out their plan to do, and that our job is to stay on them to make sure that they stay on track and they continue to do it. I think roads like Whipple Road obviously are our responsibility, and we have plans, and again, it's 1 mile at a time. But I agree that we should be fixing the water mains as we're fixing the road so that we're not tearing up new road to fix another mistake. And I think when it comes to sidewalks, I'm lucky enough to live in a neighborhood that doesn't warrant them. So I think we need to, I think there was a sidewalk committee a million years ago, and I would love to have a plan that we thoughtfully discuss where sidewalks should be instead of kind of saying they need to be everywhere. Because I'm happy that I live on a street that I can walk my dogs and not need a sidewalk every day, but I would never let my son run down South Street at night because there's no sidewalk, and I think it's dangerous. So I do think, it's needed. I think there's probably opportunity for us to find ways to do it in town and not contract it out, but I think we need to also rely on the state to do what they're obligated to do.
Great. Thank you, Jo Marie. So I believe we're moving on to our next question, and Eric Ryder will answer the question first with a 90-second response. So this is a 2-part question, and I'm sorry you did sort of touch on this already, but we're going to hammer it home. So as a voter at town meeting, how will you be voting on the town zoning proposal to comply with the MBTA Communities Act? Why? And as a select board member, if town meeting votes down the proposal, what do you do?
Thank you. Well, I will say, as I've stated before, I don't agree with the MBTA zoning requirement. I don't believe it's a one-size-fits-all answer. I'm not against development. I think responsible development, as I referenced earlier when I sat on the planning board. At town meeting, I will not be supporting this. Again, I do not think the state should enforce something on a city and town where they have a planning board and a zoning board. And then if we do not comply, we face punishment. But again, if it's voted down, that'll be the voice of the people. and I will support that. But I recently read an article that Milton is currently being sued. And I think it's best for the town to let this play out, because in that article, it's mentioned that one of the solutions, it may be put back to the legislature. And I don't think the town should have submitted anything until this lawsuit plays out, because we don't want to be in the position that we've already submitted a plan and it's overturned. Once the horse is out of the barn, we're not putting it back. I think it's best interest of this community to sit back and wait and see how this lawsuit plays out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Tom Bali, you're up next. Same question, 90 seconds.
Well, I don't support this MBTA zoning either, as it's written. I think it's an overreach from the state's part, forcing us into it, forcing into it in certain sections, and the nature of it. That's what we have zoning, that's why we have zoning laws that the cities and towns set up, so that we can structure our cities and towns as best suits us and best suits our whole outlook. Will I support that at town meeting? Absolutely not as it currently stands. If the town, as a selectman, if the townspeople say we don't want it, then I will stand behind them and say, well, we have to figure out how we're going to handle the problems that arise from telling the state no.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Tom. So next up, Jo Marie Buckley, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you, Robert. I'm glad that this is a question being asked, because I don't think any of us say that we agree with this. It's very heavy-handed, but the reality is that we have to comply with it. When we don't, like in other mandates, people get fined, people die. When municipalities don't follow this mandate, our budget will get shredded. And it's not just our budget that we need to worry about. If you've read the 32-page complaint of the Attorney General's lawsuit against the town of Milton, they aren't seeking to send it back to legislation. They are actually asking not only for fines and to be able to freeze the funding that they offer to the town, they're also asking for a special master so that the planning board, the town administrator, can no longer act in any manner until they come up with a plan that complies. Tewksbury should never be put in that position. This is not the hill that we die on. The reality is we've had public meetings, we've had thoughtful planning, we've picked a location that's already zoned to have hundreds of housing units in place. And this act, just again, not to preach, but it's really frustrating, because we shouldn't be relying on what we hear on baseball fields. We should be looking into what's really happening. This act started in 2004 as a voluntary suggestion. No one took part in it. 35 communities out of 351 took part in it. So it became a mandate by Governor Baker in 2021. And now they're asking towns to act upon it. And we have to. We can't afford to ignore it.
All right, so thank you, Jo Marie. So next up is James Mackey, and then I will allow a 30-second response from Mr. Ryder. I think that was what I just heard. I'm not, yeah, and but we're making good time, so I'm going to allow 30-second response. But Mr. Mackey, so you're up next. 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you, Robert. Ms. Buckley actually pretty much nailed most of the points I was going to speak to. I've been pretty vocal about this throughout the whole process. It is a bad piece of legislation. I don't know a single person that I've talked to who thinks that it is a good piece of legislation. It is, however, a law. And as has already been pointed out, they are not seeking to work with the community or get it kicked back and try again. They're seeking a special master, which means they choose where it goes. We have no say. With this, the select board had multiple open meetings. The planning director had multiple open meetings. We had our delegation in. We had NIMCOG in. I actually commented to NIMCOG that this is all stick, no carrot. This does nothing to help Tewksbury. We have done a lot of development in the past decade that some of our peers have not done. So the fact that we're not getting credit for that is unacceptable. If you look back 10 years, we probably have the vast majority of those units already built. Now, where it is going, well, directly impacts me. I live right down the street. But I still think that is the best location, because most of it will likely not be developed, and what will be developed was already planned to be developed. So instead of getting that development and then another large development down the road on top of the 1,214 units that we are statutorily required to zone, we save ourselves a significant number of units. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Mackey. So things often go over my head, but I think the baseball field reference might have been to something Mr. Ryder had commented on. So if you'd like to take 30 seconds to respond, it's up to you.
Absolutely. That was just mentioned. It's just a reference. I'm in the community. I'm out, whether it be at a baseball field, a youth sporting event, a high school sporting event, or at a restaurant. This is what people are saying. They do not want it. Again, the residents, they do not want this. I understand it's a mandate, but there are many mandates that we do not comply with. Many mandates that we do not comply with. Again, as I stated, I think we should wait and let this play out in court and let the judge rule on whether it is a special master or it sends it back to the legislature. Thank you.
Great, thank you. When I do the responses, I get mixed up here. But I think Mr. Bodley's up next, and this is right up your alley. I did not plan this, okay? But I think this is a good one. So we're going to put a bow on this first half of the debate. We've talked a lot about finances, and so I wanted to ask you this. For residents who primarily, or maybe solely, base their vote on who they think is going to raise their taxes the least, what would you say to them?
But when I say to them, I think raising the taxes the least is part of what they should be looking for. They should also be looking for who's going to listen closely to them and try to listen more closely to them and try to understand what they need and bring their needs to the board, which ultimately is going to the town.
All right, thank you, Tom. So next up is Jo Marie Buckley. Same question, 90 seconds.
I mean, I'm assuming a rebuttal could be for anybody up here. We're all going to say that we're going to work really hard not to increase taxes. That's one of the things that your first time out campaigning in this type of role is what you're going to try to promise. But the reality is that we should all be offering just responsible fiscal responsibility and making sure that we're monitoring our annual budget and making sure that we're allowing the town to be heard when they come to town meeting to vote on that budget. That's the reality of it. So none of us can promise that taxes aren't going up because the reality is we can't anticipate what the needs or the changes might be in our town. All I can do is say that I will always be looking for ways to be fiscally responsible in this town, and I will never be spending someone else's money in a way that I wouldn't be spending my own.
Great. Thank you, Jo Marie. So James Mackey, you're next, 90 seconds. Same question.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, fiscal responsibility is paramount. If somebody was looking at which select board member is going to increase their taxes the least, I would inform them of how town meeting works and tell them they should go to town meeting. Because while we can propose budgets, town meeting has to accept that budget. So at the end of the day, town meeting is where the buck stops. We, as a select board or potential select board members, can do a lot of things that are good, bad, and different, but that's where that stops. Now, when we talk about your tax bill raising, there are a lot of things that go into that. You have your water bill, your sewer bill, not just your property tax. Your property tax can go up for a plethora of reasons. Increase in housing value, which has been one of the largest factors recently. But also there's the exempt debts, which again goes back to town meeting. If your tax got up, tax bills went up, and you don't go to town meeting, or you're not sure why your tax bill went up in more than 2.5%, it's probably a variety of reasons. The other piece that I just mentioned was Proposition 2.5, which is a very complex part of how we raise taxes and does kind of tie our hands. Again, I think we do run a fairly lean budget. There is always room for improvement, but I would say if you're looking for a select board member to mitigate your tax raise, you're probably not looking in the right place. All we can do is try to be fiscally responsible. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, James. And next up, last response to this question, Eric Ryder, 90 seconds. Go on ahead.
Thank you. I think one way to look at it is, we do not have to raise to 2.5%. I think as a board, I think it's the responsibility of us to tell the town administrator, I would like to see a 0% increase, a 1, a 1.5%, 2.5% increase. Make them go through that exercise. Make the departments go through that exercise. And leave that up to the taxpayer. And you have to look at the level of service, because the level of service really indicates the tax rate. So again, we have to leave that, provide that data. And we need to bring residents to these meetings where we're discussing this data. Seeing what a 1% increase does versus do we need that 2.5% increase? What will that affect? Will it affect winter operations? Will it affect the police department? Will it affect, the school department? We understand there are, we have to look at cost of living increases with salaries and union contracts. But again, we have to look at those union contracts as well. Build that into our overall budget. But again, we have to be fiscally responsible and look at efficiencies across the town. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, Eric. So we're going to move on to our, I believe, 8th question. And see, I've lost you. Yes. So we're going to Jo Marie Buckley first. 90-second response. This is a more straightforward question. What do you feel are the best uses for the now vacant Trahan and North Street school properties?
Oh, that's a tough one, because I know that there's been talk about different tenants that are interested in it. I definitely think as a revenue source, we should be looking to see if we can attract again, thoughtful businesses or things that will help benefit the town. When we talk about things like a rec department, we have the rec center at Livingston, but it would be great to see if there was something that involved either recreation or community center based that could be in at least one of those facilities. I think at this point, when we have the luxury of a building that is still usable for a lot of different reasons, it's part of our economic development responsibility to see how best we can capitalize on it. And I think at this point, that's what I would be looking for, is a thoughtful tenant that would come in, like the hockey school. I'm definitely intrigued by it. It's been referenced twice now, so that would be a great asset to town.
Okay, so thank you, Jo Marie. Next up, James Mackey, 90 seconds, same question.
Absolutely, thank you. So there's been a lot of discussion about the reuses. There were committees on it. At the end of the day, I think they do need to, in some way, turn into revenue sources. Under no circumstances should they be sold. I have been very clear on that since this process started. Tewksbury owns very little land in Tewksbury, with the state and National Grid, its parent companies and subsidiaries, owning the vast majority of land in town. We need to hold on to whatever town land we can. So I think that we should be looking at leasing these properties, which is why I was so strongly in support of those long-term leases. Now, when it comes down to those proposals for leasing, it is really going to depend on the community, and that's where we need resident input. So if somebody wants to come in and put a battery factory there, it's not zoned for that, but let's say they wanted to do that, we would need resident input, because we don't want to slam a battery factory in a neighborhood. By the same token, we have to be open to options that might not fit with our ideal candidate for that site, because with a long-term lease, with taking down that building, there's going to be significant cost. So whatever partnership we get into with the tenant is going to be a long-term partnership. So I just think we need to be very open and honest and kind of willing to negotiate and maybe change our expectations on those properties. But bottom line is they should generate revenue for the town and they should not be sold. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, James. So next up, Eric Ryder, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you. As far as the Trahan, if you look at that area, densely zoned. Again, I would welcome a commercial component there, keeping that open space portion. But if that commercial entity doesn't come into town, I think we need to look at, if we continue to look at housing. The Affordable Housing Trust has funds. I think we need to partnership, but also look at responsible housing. Mimic what we have in that neighborhood. I don't suggest putting in an apartment building, but we could mimic what exist in the neighborhood, match the neighborhood, keep some open space, and put housing there. That's an option. The North Street, there is already talks that we're going to need another school in this town. The elementary schools are full. There is, not at the high school level, but at the elementary schools, they are full, and there is already talks of that school on the horizon. I know paperwork has been submitted, so I think keeping that location for the future site of the school, but also incorporating some open space. You have Frasca Field there, you have sidewalks that tie into Lee Street, down to East Street, to the baseball fields, and ultimately work towards sidewalks on Livingston Street, and connect that whole area from a school and all open space as well. Thank you.
Great. Yep. Thank you, Eric. So last but not least, Tom Bali, 90 seconds, same question.
Okay, much has been reiterated by some of my peer candidates here. I think it should be looked at as for a lease. What would go in there is, I agree, it needs to be something that fits the area. You know, you obviously don't want to put something that doesn't belong there. And what exactly, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I think the town should do something where they gain some revenue out of it, where it makes the town some money.
All right, thank you, Tom. So our next question, question number 9, is going to James Mackey, and it's a 2-part question, so sorry. But you all knew this question was coming. This is something that was in the Boston Globe, a really scary article, and there was actually a follow-up letter yesterday. It's something that Selectman Kratman mentioned at the last Select Board meeting. So 2-part question. Part 1, what can be done to improve safety and security at the Tewksbury Hospital, whose campus is near the senior center, the library, the ball fields, senior housing, and Livingston Street Park? Part 2, what can be done to get more state funding to reimburse the town costs associated with the police, fire, and ambulance responses? And so, Mr. Mackey, you're up first.
Thank you very much, Robert. So essentially, how can we improve the security at the state hospital? And then the second part was what can be done to chase down more state funding, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So the first part, because of all those reasons you just mentioned and how it is nestled between all of some of our community gems and places people spend a lot of time, it is paramount that we secure that site. We often, not always, often get some level of reimbursement from the state. But it is not a pilot program. The town does not generate any revenue until we actually get them on our water from the state hospital at this time. So I think first is making sure that we continue to push for a pilot program at the state hospital to get some dollars back, but that doesn't solve the security issue. I think the security issue needs to be resolved by the board and residents continuing to push for our delegation and the state hospital itself to continue to audit, as they have said they were going to do, and look at their security, look at their staffing levels, look at their ability to detect and respond to people that may get out of a building who shouldn't be able to, and really up their cameras, up their staffing, and communicate better and more frequently with our emergency services in town. I think that really covers it, but unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get the appropriate amount of funding from the state for the state hospital, so we need to continue for the pilot and then push them to do more on their end as well. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So next up is Eric Ryder, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you. I agree with the pilot program. Probably safety is the most concerning there. Over 3,000 calls last year to the state hospital, police and fire combined. So I think it's critical that there has to be an agreement that when somebody is missing outside of their designated area, it needs to be an immediate notification to the police. Not 3 hours later, not 4 hours later, not when they can't find them. That has to be an immediate response. I think policies need to change there. And I think it's our legislature's responsibility to represent Tewksbury residents and fight at the State House to get that done. Because it's not going to cut, we can push and push and push. Unless we have our state delegation pushing back at the state level, unfortunately, it's not going to go anywhere. And I think that starts the ball rolling. We received some money under a earmark, and that it was cut when the governor cut the budget. Unacceptable, unacceptable. You know, we don't allow, you know, a resident just to not pay their share. So I think we have to keep them and treat them just like everyone else. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eric. So next up, Tom Bali, 90 seconds. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, the security issue, part of the thing, that's up to, I think it's up to the state to put some more security in there. How you make them do it, I'm not, really don't profess to know that. I agree with the pilot program, you know, that we're going to go on supposedly, I guess, with the water. As far as the 911 services, you know, and the state's pittance that they give us, I'm one for telling the state, you're either going to pay the bill, because our residents pay this, you're going to pay what our residents pay, or we're not going to come. Pure and simple. Call the state police, get them to come.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm sure you've been chomping at the bit for this one, Joe Marie. So Joe Marie Buckley, 90 seconds, floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert. If you've been listening to all of the things you claim to do in preparation for this, you already know my answer. I'm glad to hear that my fellow candidates are now referencing the pilot program specifically, because that has been the drum I've been beating now since the beginning of this campaign season. We need to be a part of it. It needs to be guaranteed funding from the state. We have so much state land, and for whatever reason, the state delegation has decided, or the legislation has decided, that we're not currently a part of that program, and we need to get that funding in place. When I ran in 2022, it came to my attention, some of the concerns, and I am proud to say that the fire and police are now at the table for the safety meetings that happen at the state hospital. They are having audits, and I think, again, it's an important distinction that the state hospital grounds host tenants that are not the state hospital. They are programs that lease space from the state hospital. And some of these dangerous behaviors, quote unquote, that we read about in social media are not actually occurring in the state hospital proper. I will never say anything about the state hospital other than I'm amazed at the work that they're able to do with the understaffed levels that they have. They are one of 2 hospitals in the state that has both DMH and DPH. And if you read that awful article by the Boston Globe, it was incorrect in that all of the DMH side currently is forensic referrals from courts. So they clearly need more help and support from the state. And we as a town need to support them in that so that the state hospital can return to what it used to be considered in this town, which was an asset. And that's definitely one of my priorities.
Great, thank you, Joe Marie. So we're now going to go to our question 10. This is our final full-length question, okay? And so the first 9 questions, I kind of sort of knew what you were going to answer. I asked questions that I was hearing in the Carnation, the Crier, WCAP, social media. But I'm going to throw a question out there that I don't think's been raised yet this campaign season. And Mr. Ryder, you're going to answer this first. And hopefully I don't get in trouble for this one tomorrow morning. So town manager Richard Montori is now in his 15th year at the helm. He happens to be in his early 60s. Doesn't look a day over 40, I say. On a related note, Assistant Town Manager Steve Sadwick, also in his early 60s, has already notified the town of his intention to retire in the coming years. So if elected to a 3-year term, it is possible, perhaps some would say likely, you will be confronted with the retirement of the current town manager. And this situation just played out next door in Wilmington, and it wasn't pretty. So you very likely could be tasked with hiring Richard Montori's replacement. And there's really no bigger responsibility a select board member has than hiring a town manager. So what qualities would you be looking for in the town's next leader? So Mr. Ryder, 90 seconds.
Thank you. I've talked about this early on, worked with Mr. Montori, and at some point, most likely in the next 3 years, he's going to be gone. I think we need to look for somebody that has a fiscal background priority. In this market, there is not a lot of municipal managers out there. My community just went through a search. We had 4 applicants, and we have to attract, and I think our community is attractive in terms of bringing a professional manager to this town. We have to be aggressive on the salary. We have to be aggressive on what we're looking for this individual to shape. They're going to be here, hopefully, as long as Mr. Montori, to shape the way this town goes in conjunction with the select board. And I think it's work as a committee, bring on a professional firm that does that search for us. But financial background is going to be critical with our next manager. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Eric. So next up, Tom Bali, 90 seconds, same question.
Thank you. Well, I think I agree that fiscal responsibility, somebody that's fiscally very strong, it's something we need, in a town manager. I think that's something we're going to have to look for. The search, I've never gone on a search for town manager, so I can't quite answer that with a lot of authority, but I think, with the right professionals helping the town and with the select board sitting down and listening very carefully and laying out what they need and making it attractive for the guy, we can come up and at some point we'll find a town manager that we want.
Great, thank you, Tom. So next up, Jo Marie Buckley, same question, 90 seconds.
Thank you, Robert. I would hope that our next town manager would have similar qualities to our current town manager, and that would be my expectation for him or her to be in that role. I think, as you referenced, in the Wilmington Apple is extensively covered. We can learn a lot from what's going on next door and what we shouldn't be doing when it comes time. And hopefully, as a board, whatever happens in this election, we will present as a united front in what that plan should be, and we won't undermine any current administration in the process for it. But I do think it puts a spotlight on how important this election is, because it very well could be that we are going to be part of the process of the town's future for more than just the next 3 years by those types of decisions.
Great, thank you, Jo Marie. And last to respond on this question is James Mackey, 90 seconds, go ahead.
Thank you, Robert. So, as has been mentioned, fiscal responsibility is key. If you rewind 15 years, Tewksbury was in a bit of a dire situation financially. Our financial picture was not great, and Richard was hired specifically for his fiscal acumen. I think that is something we need to replicate in our search for our next town manager or assistant town manager. Other qualities we need to look at are responsiveness. So one of my favorite things about working with Richard is if I text him at 10 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the morning, I get a response quickly and is an accurate and thought out response. Oftentimes, he'll send me reference material because he knows I always ask follow-up questions. So I think we need to have that. The other piece is a strong presence and the ability to manage the various departments. Just because somebody is good at a particular discipline does not mean that they can command the broad, the width, if you will, of all of the services we have in town. And finally, I would say just general leadership qualities. Time management, executive presence, those are all very important aspects to look for in a town manager. But I will say in closing, I think we're going to have a very tough time replacing both Richard and Stephen. So thank you.
All right, thank you, James. So now we're going to embarrassingly, I don't recall what time we exactly started, but I think we're going to do 3 lightning round questions, okay? I believe that Mr. Bali, Thomas Bali, will be the first to respond. Lightning round, we're going to do 30-second responses. Some of these probably should be 90 seconds, but we're not going to go, we don't want to go 2 hours. So, just bear with me, okay? Lightning round question number 1. Do you support the town manager's decision to outsource recreation office offerings primarily to the YMCA, or would you have preferred to see a town-run recreation department be funded? And you have 30 seconds.
I can't I can't answer that completely because I haven't seen all of the things for the YMCA that they're talking about. It's not a bad idea. Definitely not a bad idea, but again, until I see all the particulars on it, I can't really comment on that.
Okay. Yep, thank you, Tom. Next up, Joe Marie Buckley. Same question, try to go to 30 seconds.
Yep. The short answer is yes. I do agree with what's happening because I think it was an immediate, a more immediate reaction in response to the demand that was being requested by the group that was facilitating it. I do think we need to do a full assessment as to the needs of the town as a whole and then develop what type of position that would be from children to seniors. Where are the gaps in the servicing that we currently have before we hire someone?
Great, thank you. So James Mackey, 30 seconds, same question.
Yes, vehemently yes. I had a number of discussions before that decision was made. At the time, and even now, we cannot bear the cost of hiring an additional staff personnel. We've had a lot of discussion tonight about being fiscally conservative, cutting costs. This, as I mentioned earlier, actually brings revenue to town without any additional cost burden on the town. It's a starting point. It's not the final answer, but I think this is an amazing place to start. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, James. Last respondent for this question, 30 seconds, Eric Ryder.
Thank you. Again, I stated I'm in support of a full-time recreation director. However, I'm not opposed to a presentation. I think a presentation should be put in front of the select board, and we can have at a public meeting, bring those community members that have been the force behind a recreation department. I think bringing them in, and I think it could be a step in the right direction, but without having the presentation in front of me, we really can't make that answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So next up is Joe Marie Buckley, lightning round question number 2.
Bring it.
And I'm going to ask you, Mr. Mackey, to answer this question as well. A few weeks, well, you're all going to answer this question. You'll see what I mean. A few weeks ago, the current select board voted on delaying issuing the last cannabis license for a year. Recreational marijuana. If you were a member of the select board, what would have been your stance on this issue, and what rationale would you provide for your decision?
I support what the select board did at the last meeting. I think that was the right decision. I think just because we have 3 licenses from the state doesn't mean we need to utilize 3 licenses from the state. And with all that was percolating from the situation, I think they made the right choice. And I think going forward with that last license, we should be evaluating whatever plans come in front of us. But without any plans currently pending, I think that issue is not a current topic, hopefully, for the moment.
Great. So thank you, Joe Marie. James Mackey, you're next. I know you took the vote, but if you could respond, that'd be great. 30 seconds.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me see. So a few weeks ago, the current select board voted on delaying issuing the last cannabis license for a year. They voted, first of all, this is an audience question. I should have vetted this a little better. But if you were a member of the select board, what would have your stance been on the issue, and what rationale would you provide for your decision? So I think that this was the vote where you did.
Moratorium.
Yes, the moratorium. That's the word I should have put in there. Yes.
Absolutely. So my stance is the same it was, my rationale is the same it was. I'll repeat them. I think a moratorium is not in service to the town. This was introduced as a economic development opportunity, and I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice by not at least considering other opportunities that come before us. It's a very complex topic, but at bottom line, we have a free tax lane that we can tap, and I think we should continue to drive towards that and try to find somebody to fill that license. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, James. So next up, Eric Ryder, 30 seconds, your response.
Thank you. I do agree with the board. I will agree, some of my colleagues up here. We have 3 licenses. There's nothing that states that we have to give 3 licenses. I didn't see each proposal, but again, if a proposal is presented, if I'm elected, I think we have to look at it, location, the impact, making sure that the community as a whole is aware of this. Thank you.
Great. So Mr. Tom Bali, you are the last to respond. 30 seconds. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I agree that we need, that we have 3 licenses, at some time they should be filled. My big question with it is, we've got 2 licenses already out there that are approved and ready to go. We haven't broke ground on either one of them yet. Maybe we should be looking at it from the respect that let's not put away that 3rd license, but slow down a little bit and see what is going on with these other 2 and how they impact the town.
Great. All right, thank you very much. So our final lightning round question goes to Mr. Mackey first, James Mackey. 30-second response. Do you feel the town needs a committee to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So this is a great question. We actually had a lot of discussion. I was on when the vote was taken to create it. I don't believe that in its initial capacity it was needed, but I am always supportive of if the community believes it needs a committee and they have something that they want to do, I'm supportive of it. The initial iteration that was proposed, I was not in support of, but the existing iteration I think is fine. If you want to have celebrations and have a place to belong, I think that is perfectly acceptable within the community. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, James. So next response, 30 seconds. Eric Ryder, same question.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I think a committee is not a bad thing. I think it's an outlet for the community to be involved and work towards events of all types. And I think the committee open it up to residents, and what that allows is every resident in town to be involved. At the end of the day, that's what I would like to see is more community involvement. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, Eric. So next up, Tom Bali, same question, 30 seconds.
I don't think committees are a bad thing either. I think they're very healthy for the town. And although I don't know enough really to say how the whole DEI committee is going and this and that and everything else, I don't hear a lot of bad things. I mean, it's like you hear good things and bad things of everything. I don't hear a lot of bad things, but I think the fact that we have the committees for community involvement is important. And that's who we're representing. We're representing the people.
All right, thank you, Tom. And our last response is Jo Marie Buckley, 30 seconds, same question.
I support every committee that is in this town that engages residents in any way. And I support any committee that would make sure that all residents of this town feel like they're included as a resident of this town.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Jo Marie. So we are going to go to closing statements, and I think I'm just going to keep this order going. So Mr. Ryder, you're up first. 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank Robert for moderating tonight, and Rosalind, thank you. In closing, I want to thank everyone that is watching at home and those that came out in the rain to tonight's event. I want you to know that I will be an advocate for the residents and taxpayers of this town. I will use my 30 years of municipal experience to the fullest. I will research issues on its merits. I will be proactive when it comes to economic development. My expertise in municipal management, capital projects, infrastructure separates me from the other candidates and allows me to be an educated, informed, and confident independent voice for the residents of Tewksbury. I am visible, I am active, I am engaged, I am approachable. I am committed to the community. Please vote for Eric Ryder for selectman on April 6th. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Eric. So next up is Thomas Bali, up to 2 minutes, closing statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Again, I would also like to thank yourself and Rosalind for your good work doing the moderation and the people that put this event on. And I'd like to thank the people that came tonight to turn out to listen, and also those at home as well. I would just like to say that I want to be a voice for the people. I want their voices to be heard. And I want to try to do the right things. I want to put my years of business experience to work to try to give it a private business slant to work with the people in the municipalities and try to move this town forward, in the ways that we want to see it go. And again, I'd be very happy if anybody voted for me on April 6th. My name is Tom Bowley, and I thank you all very, very much.
Great, thank you, Tom. So next up, Jo Marie Buckley, up to 2 minutes, closing statement.
Thank you, Robert, for moderating tonight. Thank you to Rosalind for the timekeeper, the town crier, the carnation. Thank you to Tewksbury Telemedia for allowing my mother to be able to watch this from home tonight. I want to thank my husband and daughter who are here tonight, and all my friends who came in person, as well as the ones supporting me from home, and the residents who are taking the time to watch this, because I think this is an important part of this process for people to hear us talk on these different issues. This election is about Tewksbury's future. It's not about Tewksbury's past. We need the most skilled and most experienced on the select board for the years ahead. This election is not about looking back. This election is about what we already know lies ahead. This election is serious. Our community must be led by the very best, by the most engaged, the most energetic, and the most knowledgeable. This is our community. This is our town. The municipal level is where our votes carry the most impact, where the informed voter can keep things the most focused, but also where mistakes are the most magnified. I want our town to flourish. I want our town to be better than it's ever been. And I want the thought of our future to bring peace to our hearts, not uncertainty and worry. Our votes should be aimed true at those who will work for that future, those who can secure that future, and those who value our future. We are the engine of democracy, and our votes are the only track upon which Tewksbury runs. So I humbly request that you vote for me on April 6th to keep Tewksbury moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo Marie. And last but not least, James Mackey, 2 minutes, closing statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert, Rosalind, all the staff that made this possible, all the residents in the room, and all those tuning in. As has been previously mentioned, I'm a fourth-generation resident, I'm a veteran, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm currently a sitting member of our select board. I have a unique skill set, and I believe that I have delivered measurable results to the town of Tewksbury over the past 3 years. Those of you who know me know that I am not one for the limelight or photo ops. I am always reachable. My cell phone is public, my email is public, you can get a hold of me. I prefer to put my head down and get the mission done. I'm a man of action and effort who believes that if you're not the best at something, as I was not when I first joined, it took me a full year to get my feet under me and learn the duties of a selectman beyond what I was able to read, that you better be the hardest working person there. And that's what I have done over the past 3 years. I have given it 110% effort to move the needle for the residents of Tewksbury. Now, I've been told that my lack of visibility may hurt my chances for re-election, but I believe that the voters of Tewksbury are intelligent and will do their own research. I have faith that my actions will speak louder than any words. I know that the results I've delivered may be hard to believe, but everything that I have spoken about is factual and verifiable. If you have questions about specifics of the results, I implore you to reach out, do research, or give me a call and we can have a conversation. To quote the great Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. Should the voters honor me with the opportunity to serve a second term, I plan to continue my focus on improving our water infrastructure, modernizing and securing our IT infrastructure, and ensuring fiscal responsibility wherever possible. I will continue to drive for more efficient and transparent government and continue to combat overdevelopment and state overreach wherever I can. I believe that my last 3 years have been successful, but I believe that there is more. I have more to offer the town, and the work is just beginning. It is for these reasons and many more that I humbly request your vote on April 6th. Please check out mackeyfortewksbury.com for more information. Thank you.
Great. So thank you, James, and really thank you all for a great debate. Thank you, everyone, for participating in tonight's forum. I'd like to thank the candidates, Tom Bawley, I'm going to get it right, not Bailey. Let me get this up. I had it going for a while, and then I lost it, Tom Bawley, okay? Jo Marie Buckley, James Mackey, Eric Ryder, for sharing their thoughts and ideas and for stepping up to participate in our town. So residents, please remember remember to vote on Saturday, April 6th. Polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you have any questions about voting, please call the town clerk's office. I'm Robert Hayes, and on behalf of the Tewksbury Town Crier, the Tewksbury Carnation, and the brains of this operation, Rosalind Impink, thank you and have a great night.